I wish you had some of those conversations on tape that you had with him in your living room in Halifax.
Well, you couldn't have taped those conversations. We would, for example, start. We would start reading Shakespeare at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, you've told
and
me
there was
about
this wonderful place. We had this lovely house on College Street. And there was a place you could stand in the living room where you got this incredible echo back from the bay window. And at 3 a.m, Beverly would just like put a pillow on her head, right? It was just, and we weren't like blasted, but we would just be into the language. You know, King Lear's hands, they stink of mortality. What is the stuff of life, and what is the articulation of it, and in terms of classical literature to like the folk process.
I remember,
it was wonderful.
I remember hearing Stan talk about those evenings and about debating literature and writing with you until the sun came up. And he would come back from some of those trips with, I think, some of his best songs. Make and Break Harbor.
Yeah, that was fun. We would
was a product of that, right?
We would do poem song cycles. We evolved this crazy notion called anecdote, which we figured was going to be a model that they could do right across the whole country. Because one of the things that we saw in terms of our conversations, why aren't more poets and writers talking to songwriters? Because in some cases you have concrete poetry and all this stuff, on the page visually, which is like pretty esoteric nonsense, a lot of it. What about the common chord? What about the notion of writing as the study of the human heart? From Stan's point of view, and from my point of view, I was fascinated with the way he would meld the lyric phrase to the musical phrase. And he had a real talent, a real knack for that. And we went through all the old Helen Creighton nonsense, and he wanted to write about, historical stuff. We were both history buffs.
What do you mean Helen Creighton nonsense?
Well, Helen Creighton nonsense in the sense that, like, 37 verses.
She's an important woman.
37 verses, of the same melody going again and again. I mean, one of the
that
concepts.
Wasn't her fault.
No, I know. She recorded it. She did a great job. She said, Helen Creighton is wonderful, but the material itself is
get
like
that?
arcane. Okay, how can you, for example, like the requirement of the modern songwriter, which is to find the psychological shorthand that a modern contemporary lyric would give you, and still get the kind of language that'll give you register or reflect the language community of the time, of the period, the archaisms in the language, for example. And so, we would get into Leach's theoretical linguistics, or a linguistic guide to English poetry.
I'm glad I wasn't there.
Study the My Last Duchess as a dramatic monologue.
Terrific.
It was great stuff. We went nuts.
And then I'd say, he'd write a song from that, and I'd say, okay, how many guitars do you want on it?
Yeah, right. Well, that was true too. But the other side was, I heard like a steady growth from these guys that was really remarkable. Every track that came out. I remember you did some stuff for the 76 Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
So Hard to Be So Strong.
Yeah.
And you did that quite early because it was going to be released for the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And Stan wrote Delivery Delayed.
Yeah.
And that came out of a whole conversation in terms of the lyric style, the verse style, was like Charles Olson and Robert Creeley and Black Mountain Poetry and projective verse. Yeah. Which, is quite a distinct song for Stan, stylistically, but it had, like, really solid, literate roots.
I think what we're talking about here is the craft of songwriting. It's the sweat part. I think it was Lightfoot or somebody, hundreds of people said songwriting is 90% perspiration and only 10% inspiration, and it's the 90% that Bill's talking about. Stan really did learn the craft from many sources. This guy is responsible for a lot of the lyrical craft that...
No, hold it now. You're talking about a guy who's a natural writer. I mean,
okay.
This is a guy that read. The same way, like, my brother and I wear glasses, my twin brother and I, because we used to, like, read books under our blankets with flashlights. And Stan Rogers did the same kind of thing, okay? I mean, and it's not like a kind of superimposed literacy, but the guy loved to read. He would read anything. Mm-hmm. He would borrow books, take them away on the road, and they'd come back. And he'd come back with another one. Mm-hmm. And history was like the big one for him. So there wasn't a kind of fear of the spoken word. And there wasn't a kind of like, we're going to steal that line. It's like, how does this work? What was that like?
Everything that went in stayed there.
Yeah, amazing retentive thing. But also like an enormous scrambly frame sometimes to get the focus to say, what is the job of this particular piece structurally?
Yeah.
which is the same kind of thing as organizing what kind of, what instruments really reflect the heart of this given piece. It's the same kind of process. And it's not like a magical one in the sense that it's, Stan got a great flash from the sky, and all of a sudden a song was born. It's a craft that you learn and you work on all the time.
And he was great at it.
He really was. But he was a born writer. He
Yeah.
naturally had that sense of the detail, the concrete universal. You were talking, the granite-dusted knees in the Rawdon Hill songs, or the Carnation Can.
Yeah.
The one little detail that renders the context of the song real and transitive and, experienced reality. And that sense that took a lot of time. I mean, which is the exact detail that you want out of all the possibilities? You spread them out there on the table.